Except when they took my check, they grew angry with me.
I can't believe how useless you are. It's been 4 weeks and you haven't made enough to cover your rent.
But you never said how much rent would be. Plus, I'm only 15. This is a good paying job for someone my age.
Well, it's not enough. You knew what I would do if you didn't live up to your end of the agreement. Now get out before I get our gun and shoot you and put you out of your misery.
Without even packing a bag, I ran out of the house as I knew that she wasn't just bluffing. Hi there, my name is Tyrone, and I just recently turned 28 years old. I have had a very interesting life so far, and I hope that my story perhaps motivates you to try to do great things with your life as well. To be honest, I wasn't always the most assertive or ambitious growing up. Part of it was my own fault, of course. But my parents never really did make me feel like I could do anything. In fact, they pretty much told me that they expected me to never amount to anything. When I was young, my parents would tell me that I was worthless, while my sister was considered to be the golden child. A big part of that attitude stemmed from my mother having a very controlling and abusive father, and as a result, she hated men with a passion. I never could understand how she managed to agree to marry my father, but the fact that he was extremely weak and submissive probably played a big role in it. She would boss him around and belittle him all the time, and he just took it without a word. Part of me felt sorry for him, but only a little. After all, he never stood up for me when my mother picked on me.
And what do you want?
Oh, hey Mom. I was just wondering if you and Dad would be interested in coming to my baseball game.
Why on earth would we?
Well, it would mean a lot to me. Please?
Of course not. Oh God, I wish we had given you up for adoption. When we saw that you were a boy, we were so disappointed.
She was always saying things like that. It hurt a lot, but by the time that I was 15, I had gotten used to it. My younger sister, however, was always being praised. They truly loved her. And it was all because she was a girl. They would give her gifts when she would get B's in school and say nothing when I got straight A's. I remember when I was learning how to drive a car. I was desperate to get some experience driving a car, and they absolutely refused to let me drive one of theirs. I was so worried that I would fail my driver's test because I hadn't gotten any experience, and so I did something incredibly stupid. I borrowed one of their cars and drove to the end of the street and back. Nothing was damaged, and I obeyed every law. But when they discovered that I had taken it without their permission, that was when things really took a nasty turn for the worst.
How dare you steal our car?
I didn't steal it. I just borrowed it because I needed to practice for my test.
No, you ungrateful piece of crap. You stole our car, and after all that we have done for you, we knew that you would probably end up as a delinquent.
Please, I'm really sorry. I'll give you gas money to pay for the gas I used. Please. I'm really sorry.
Not as sorry as you will be. Tomorrow, you are going to get a job, and you are going to start paying rent. And you fall behind on a single payment, then we're kicking you out of the house. Is that understood?
I nodded that I did, and agreed that I would get a job the next day, but my mother didn't wait to hear me. She started punching me, and I tried to raise my arms to protect myself. She began punching me.
I said, do you understand?
Yes, Mother, I understand. Please stop. She did stop, but she looked like she was going to start again at any second. Meanwhile, when I looked at my dad, he was smiling, almost as if he enjoyed watching me get hurt. The next day, I did try to do as my mother had commanded me, but at 15, it was hard to find a job that quickly. I applied at several restaurants around town. I wasn't very picky, and applied to any job that I saw. I didn't care if I was going to be a dishwasher, a busboy, or even a janitor. I just needed money. That day I went home and told my mom that I hadn't found anything. She grew enraged and started hitting me again. This time I didn't block her, and so she only punched me. It still stung a lot, but it wasn't as bad as her punching me. The day after that, though, was more of the same. I went out to find a job, but struck out and received a beating when I got home empty-handed. But finally on the third day, I managed to find a job at a mom and pop home repair store. It wasn't a great paying job, but they were really nice people. That night when I went home and told them that I had found a job, both my parents just sneered at me. They told me that I had better make enough money to cover my rent. They hadn't told me how much rent was, but I knew that it was going to be some crazy amount, and I could only hope that I would make enough to cover it. After my first week of work, I came home with my paycheck, and they demanded that I give it to them. I did, of course, and they took it and walked away. I had anticipated that they would demand a large portion of it, but I didn't think they would just take all of it. It was the same the next week and the week after that. And by the end of the month, I just assumed that they would take that last paycheck as well. I was effectively working as a slave for them at that point, except when they took my check, they grew angry with me.
I can't believe how useless you are. It's been 4 weeks and you haven't made enough to cover your rent.
But you never said how much rent would be. Plus, I'm only 15. This is a good paying job for someone my age.
Well, it's not enough. You knew what I would do if you didn't live up to your end of the agreement. Now get out before I get our gun and shoot you and put you out of your misery.
Without even packing a bag, I ran out of the house as I knew that she wasn't just bluffing. I really had nowhere to go, and so I just went and slept outside the hardware store where I worked. I figured, at least I would be on time for work in the morning, and then tomorrow afternoon I could maybe figure something out. In the morning, the owner found me and asked why I was sleeping on the sidewalk. When I told him, he was absolutely astonished and disheartened by what I had gone through.
Listen, I have a room upstairs. Why don't you live up there for now, but only if you keep going to school and getting good grades?
Well, you know how much I make. I can't give you much in the way of rent.
When I was your age, my parents had kicked me out too, but unlike you, I was a troublemaker. My boss at the time took me and took care of me until I was an adult. I'm just going to do the same for you, in the interest of paying it forward.
I couldn't believe how much my luck changed, and true to his word, the owner never charged me rent while I was in school, and he even helped me find scholarships so that I could attend college as well. I ended up going for electronics engineering, and after working at the hardware store, I had all kinds of interesting ideas for how to design power tools that would be cheaper but also more durable as well. After I graduated, I applied to a bank for a loan to start up my own business. And at first, the owner of the store that I used to work out was the only person that sold my products. But word of mouth got around stores all over the city, and then the country began to call me for orders. I had to take out another loan to purchase a factory that could satisfy the demand for my inventions. And before long, I had not only paid off my loans, but I had made a small fortune for myself as well. I was beginning to really make a name for myself, and people thought about power tools. My company was the first name that came to mind. It felt really good, after all. I had been told that I wouldn't amount to anything, and here I was proving them wrong. However, with success, my old family came looking for me, hoping that I would share my wealth with them. I was working at my main office when my secretary showed my old family in. They had made such a massive fuss that the secretary had agreed to let them see me, but she also made sure that security was ready to have them removed at the drop of a hat. My father pushed my mother into my office. She had had a stroke the previous year and lost the ability to talk and walk as well. My father had become her primary caregiver, and I could tell that it was exhausting for him as he had massive bags under his eyes. Even my sister looked a bit unwell and exhausted. I could see marks on her arms that looked like they were from heavy drug use. And what do you people want?
Well, we heard about your success, and we think it's only right that you share the wealth of it with your family.
And why on earth would I do that? You and Mother kicked me out all those years ago after stealing my money from me.
Only because you stole the car.
Yeah, that was irresponsible of me, but I was a kid. Kids make mistakes, but that didn't give you the right to make me homeless because I used your car and didn't earn enough. You kicked me out. I could have died on the streets.
Well, you didn't, and you're rich now, so you can help us out.
I leaned in real close to my mother, just so I was sure that she would hear me. I wouldn't help you if you were the last people on Earth. I'm glad that you are left weak as you are. Now your outsides match your insides, you petty evil woman. This fate is way too good for you. You are such a vile monster that I hope that you suffer even more before the devil takes you to hell. And with that, I signaled my security to remove them from my office and to never allow them entrance again. The look of anger on my mother's face made it all that much sweeter. In the coming months, I paid a visit to the man that I had worked for at the hardware store and saw that he was tired and needed to retire. I of course paid for him to live in a retirement home that was so swanky that he had his own butler, and his twilight years were some of the best years of his entire life. I made sure that if he ever wanted anything at all, that he would get it. He had helped me find my way in life, and I wanted to repay him fully. As for my parents, I found out that all the stress of constantly caring for my mother had caused my father to have a massive heart attack, and he died leaving my sister to care for my mother. She, however, had never done well in school and has resorted to becoming a prostitute to pay for her drug habit and for my mother. Unfortunately, she passed away from a drug overdose, leaving my mother all alone. The police asked if I would take care of her, and I refused, saying that she had disowned me many years ago. I'm not sure where she ended up, to be honest, but I can imagine that they put her in a group home run by the government. From what I hear about those places, I doubt that she is doing well, if she is still alive even. As for me, well, my company is doing great. I have several offers to expand my catalog and in my personal life. I've recently met an amazing woman, and things are going really well. So things ended up working out in the end, I suppose. Do you think I was so harsh with my parents? Comment below your thoughts.
All the cleaning is done by me. And don't you dare talk about the kitchen as if you don't march in there and eat everything you can get your grubby hands on after everyone is asleep.
I'm not doing a woman's job, and as if I'd eat your cooking. Ken, you made a massive mistake marrying this bitch.
I hit him as hard as I could. I feel bad now, looking back on it. I'm sure my kids were watching, and I think I still had some of the adrenaline from my house being on fire. But we had our fight on the front lawn, rolling around, punching each other.
Hello, my name is Sarah, and I'm a stay-at-home mother of 2. My husband Ken and I got married 4 years ago just after college. I should mention that Ken's family has always been terrible. His father died of alcoholism when he was young, and his mother, Leah, always hated me for stealing her baby boy away from her. His brother only ever calls my husband to ask for more money to support his sports gambling addiction or pay off bad debt, despite working full-time in construction. Even at our wedding, his family kept making offhand comments about my dress or how bad the food was, as if they were ready for it to be over. To say that they are a nightmare in my life is an understatement, but we only have to deal with them around the holidays. It came as no surprise when we heard that Ken's brother Sam lost his construction job and was evicted from his apartment soon after. In fact, we had expected it. Sam was always horrible with his money and spending habits. It wasn't until his mother turned up at our front door telling Ken to let him stay with us that I realized how naive I was. If only I knew then what would happen afterwards.
You're the older brother. It's your responsibility to look after your younger brother.
He's almost 35 years old. It's his own fault that he got himself into this mess.
It doesn't matter how. What matters is that it's your responsibility. You have a spare couch in the living room, don't you?
Mom, I'm not having my kid's uncle crash in the living room. That's not right.
So you would rather have him sleep on the street?
That's not what I meant.
Good. I'll tell him to pack his things.
Sam was always the slob of the family, and that was saying something. I don't think he's ever owned a piece of clothing that wasn't either stained or torn. My fear of him sleeping in the living room was imagining my kids wading through the trash and tripping over stray pillows he'd leave around just to get to the kitchen. Within 2 hours of my mother-in-law appearing at our front door, he pulled up the driveway in a badly damaged and smoke-stained car that looked like it was on its last legs. She must have called him as soon as she left to tell him to drive over. It looked like he had been living out of his car for the last few days.
Hey, buddy. Thanks for letting me stay with you until I'm back on my feet. Here, can you carry this inside?
Oof, this is heavy. What's in here?
Oh, just an old comic book collection. You have space for it, don't you?
I looked at my husband, but he just shrugged. His car was packed with loose belongings, things that wouldn't even sell at a garage sale. Lots of trash mixed in with old jackets and boxes that smelled like cigarette smoke. Some of the neighbors started watching us unpack his car, and I felt embarrassed by it. I told myself that it was only for a little while and that we'd do the same for my family. We piled his stuff in the corner of the living room, agreeing to find a better place to store it in the morning. It nearly overflowed onto the floor, and I half thought about setting up the kids' safety gate around it just to contain it all. It was already almost dinner time, and I hadn't started cooking yet. Ken went upstairs to get spare pillows and blankets. I went into the kitchen to start preparing the meal, and Sam followed me in.
So, what's for dinner?
I'm just making a simple lasagna. It's the kids' favorite.
Lasagna is my favorite too. I doubt you could make it better than my mom, though.
Better than Leah? I can certainly try.
I doubt that. From what I can tell, you've never been a good cook.
Excuse me?
Here you go. A place to sleep for the night.
Ken came down with the supplies and brought Sam into the living room. I pulled Ken aside afterwards and told him what Sam had said, but he insisted I don't take it to heart. His family had always said harsh things, and they didn't mean it to be insulting. I sighed and let it go. For the first little while of him staying, I thought that maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I would feel better about him staying after he showered. After all, he was my husband's brother, and it was the right thing to do. Those thoughts went out the window after dinner. I always set my lasagna on the stove to rest after I take it out of the oven, and I left the room. When I came back, over half of it was gone. There was barely enough left for me and the kids. When I asked Sam about it, he denied eating any and said it must have been the kids. It continued like that over the weekend and into next week. Food around the house would go missing, the bathroom would be left a stinking disaster, and Sam would reuse old clothes instead of doing laundry. Can you ask him how long he plans on staying for? It's already been 2 weeks, and I don't think he's applied to any jobs.
Yeah, I can do that. Is he bugging you that much?
Well, I'd certainly like my living room back. I'm afraid to even go into it when he's not there, and he stays up watching TV so late that the kids have a hard time sleeping from the noise. You already told him last week to keep it down. Also, could you tell him to stop smoking in the house? The other day, I caught him napping on the sofa while holding a lit cigarette.
Good point. I'll talk to him in the morning. Hey, how's it going? Going good. How about yourself? Good. Listen, I need to talk to you about some stuff. How long are you planning on staying for? Have you applied to any jobs yet? Dude, you don't have to be an asshole about it. You want me to be homeless? You think it's easy to get a job? That's not what I said. I'm asking a simple question. Why don't you ask your wife to get a job? Why can't she help out around here? Half the time, the kitchen isn't even cleaned properly. What does she do all day anyways? First of all, leave her out of this. Second, you don't do anything all day either. When was the last time you left the house, besides doing a beer run? I haven't seen you move from that couch. You spend all day watching reruns and football. You need to get it together. Also, can you stop smoking in the house? It's a fire hazard. I was infuriated. I stormed away and marched upstairs, and by the time I was back in my bedroom, I already had a missed call from my mother. She yelled at me for what I said to my brother, calling me inconsiderate and cruel. I told her that it wasn't right and that I had a family to take care of. She argued back that we are your family and that your wife is just your wife. At this, I was so angry, I hung up the phone. When I went downstairs, I found Sam had already started drinking, smoking, and watching TV again, and ignored me.
I woke up in the middle of the night to the smell of smoke. I jumped out of bed, faster than I could wake up, and raced out the bedroom door. Already, the top floor was a haze of thick black smoke, and I started coughing. I called for Ken to wake up, and I went into my kids' rooms to wake them up. I put both on either shoulder, carrying them downstairs, covering their mouths with their pajamas. When we were outside, I put them on the lawn and turned around. The house was on fire, spreading from the kitchen to the living room and crawling up the inside of the windows. Smoke poured out from the front door. The heat and smoke made my eyes water, and I wasn't sure how I hadn't noticed it while I was still in the house. A moment later, Ken and Sam came through the front door. My kids ran up to hug my husband, and Sam looked in disbelief back at the house. Immediately, I accused him.
It wasn't me. Maybe if you had kept the kitchen in better shape and cleaned up once in a while, nothing would have set on fire.
Excuse me? Don't dare talk about the kitchen or shift blames. You most have caused this with a cigarette in your hand when you fell asleep. And as for the kitchen, you've never even offered to help with the dishes, let alone clean up after yourself. All the cleaning is done by me. And don't you dare talk about the kitchen as if you don't march in there and eat everything you can get your grubby hands on after everyone is asleep.
I'm not doing a woman's job, and as if I'd eat your cooking. Ken, you made a massive mistake marrying this bitch. I hit him as hard as I could. I feel bad now, looking back on it. I'm sure my kids were watching, and I think I still had some of the adrenaline from my house being on fire. But we had our fight on the front lawn, rolling around, punching each other. I don't remember how long we rolled around, but it took 2 of the neighbors and a few firemen to pull us apart, so I knew it lasted until the firemen got there. After that, we gave our statements to the police, and the firefighters put out what remained of our home. The top floor was gone, including all of the kids' belongings.
We got set up in a nearby hotel, without Sam, and tried to sleep away the few hours left of the early morning. I stopped responding to my mom's phone calls, and I blocked my brother soon after.
From what we're told after, the fire had been started from a lit cigarette that was left unattended. Sam apparently had lit it, and then forgotten about it and went to sleep. It had apparently fallen on garbage that he had left on the kitchen table, and had ignited. It took over pretty quickly from there. We were told that we were lucky to have made it out alive. The worst of it was smoke inhalation for Ken and Sam, which resulted in some small coughing from my husband and numerous phone calls from my mother-in-law complaining about what a horrible mother I am and what I had done to her son. Soon afterwards, we decided to go out of state and get new jobs. We didn't hear much from his family after that, and we enjoyed the peace and quiet to settle down. Obviously, we had no intention of ever contacting them again either, and we believed we could never forgive either of them for their actions and their words. However, what Sam had said to me stuck with me, and I developed insomnia. The therapist that I talked to said that it was to be expected from house fire victims and would fade with time. We knew we couldn't sue Sam for physical or emotional damages since he was bordering on bankruptcy at any moment. But we were happy enough to never speak to him again anyways. We later found out that Sam had used up the rest of his mother's savings, trying to pay off his sports gambling debts. Leah ended up having to sell her house just to make enough for retirement. It had been over a year, and now they both live together in a trailer park, and my mother-in-law and Sam have to pick up a minimal wage jobs to make ends meet. I hear they flip burgers in a tiny restaurant, while our family lives in a larger house than we had before with mountains all around. The greatest part is that we'll never have to see them again. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying, "I subscribed," and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
Okay, Scott, that's it. I'm not gonna let you steal my money anymore or push me around. This ends today. Oh, poor little Johnny thinks he has what it takes to stand up to his betters. That's almost cute. I couldn't believe how stubborn he was. It was clear that I was no longer the weak little boy that he used to pick on, and yet he would not stop being a jerk. He even took a swing at me that I managed to duck. Since he swung first, I knew that I could fight back since it was just self-defense, and I punched him in the face. Hi there, my name is John, and I had been bullied most of my life. When I was younger, I was rather scrawny, and since I did well in school, there were a few kids that saw me as an easy target. I would complain to my parents and tell them about how I would get cornered and beaten up or teased and made fun of almost every day, but there was only so much they could do for me. Unfortunately, there was only one school in the small town that we lived in, and there weren't any other options since my parents couldn't homeschool me. Listen, John, I know that you have it hard at school, but you just need to stand up to those bullies. And if they don't back down, just do your best to make it through. But Dad, you don't get it. They are making my life a living hell. I know, John, but you will eventually graduate from high school, and then you'll never have to see them ever again. They just pick on you because you make them feel insecure because they aren't as smart as you. Just do your best, and maybe in the meantime, we can go to the gym together? I wanted to believe my father's words, but I had been bullied for so long that it was beginning to wear me down. I felt so low that I had even contemplated suicide, but my father's words rung in my head. He had promised that all I had to do was get through high school, and then I would be free from those idiots that picked on me. Weeks passed, and my bullies only ramped up their abuse of me. They would stuff me into lockers and leave me there during classes, or they would steal my lunch money and make me spend the whole day hungry. It was then that I had had enough, and I decided that I would take my father up on his offer, and together we began going to the gym. At first, I didn't see any results, but with each passing week, I began to feel stronger, and I even began to gain muscle mass. A few of my bullies noticed this and began to stop harassing me. But there was one in particular, Scott, that just wouldn't quit. Scott was the quarterback for the school football team, and he picked on me more than anyone else. One day, I had had enough, and I confronted him. Okay, Scott, that's it. I'm not gonna let you steal my money anymore or push me around. This ends today. Oh, poor little Johnny thinks he has what it takes to stand up to his betters. That's almost cute. I couldn't believe how stubborn he was. It was clear that I was no longer the weak little boy that he used to pick on, and yet he would not stop being a jerk. He even took a swing at me that I managed to duck. Since he swung first, I knew that I could fight back since it was just self-defense, and I punched him in the face. After that, we exchanged blows until some teachers broke up the fight. I ended up nearly being expelled for that fight and had to miss 2 weeks of school, but it was worse for Scott. He was kicked off the football team on top of missing school, and he blamed me for it as well. How he could justify that stance, I didn't understand. After all, he had only lost his spot on the team because he was being a bully. I had the right to stand up for myself. When we finally were able to attend school again, Scott went right back to trying to make my life a living hell. He would tease me every day and would even break into my locker and leave bags of dog poop in there, although I could never prove that it was him that was doing it. In the end, I didn't know what to do. Here I had finally stood up to him. I had grown stronger, and yet he still wouldn't stop picking on me. It was infuriating. It was then that I hatched a plan. If he wouldn't stop, then it was up to me to make it at least hard, if not unappealing, to continue to pick on me. And so, I doubled the amount of time that I spent at the gym, and when I felt strong enough, I tried out for the football team. The coach was so impressed with me that he made me the new quarterback. With that done, the first step to my plan had been achieved, and I then moved on to my next one. All of Scott's friends were on the football team, and he had been dating the head cheerleader. But I had plans to make those friends mine, and to even try to steal his girlfriend as well. The next step of my plan was risky, and there was a lot of margins for error. But I did my best, and I played really well, and our team won quite a few games as a result. We did so well, in fact, that we made it to the championships. As a result, everyone on the team loved me, and Beverly, the head cheerleader, took notice of me. Things between her and Scott were on rocky footing to begin with after he had escalated his bullying of me, and now seeing me as the quarterback and winning games for our school had made her see me in a new light. The championships consisted of 4 games, and thanks to my leadership, we were able to make it through the first 3 with ease. On the day that we were driving out to the big and final game, all the cheerleaders and football players loaded up onto a bus and drove to the next city over for the game. On the way there, Beverly told me that she had developed a crush on me and wanted to know if I wanted to go on a date after we won the big game. I, of course, agreed. That day, we played as good as we possibly could, and although it ended up being a very close game, we ended up winning by only 3 points. It was the first time that our school had won a championship in over a decade, and the whole school celebrated. Days after that, I took Beverly out for dinner to a local restaurant, and we had an amazing time, right up until we finished eating and were on our way to a movie. The theater was only a few blocks away from the restaurant, so we decided to walk there. On our way, Scott ambushed us though, and he looked like he was going to murder me. Good, I finally found you. You are going to pay for ruining my life. What are you talking about? You ruined your own life by being an absolute jerk. When will you realize that your bullying me is what is causing your life to fall apart? Stop lying. Scott lurched at me and started trying to punch me, but it was obvious that he was a bit drunk and his movements were clumsy. He tried to fight me, but I was able to dodge his fists, and eventually I pushed him to the ground in an attempt to end the fight without hurting him. Just as he was about to stand back up and charge at me, a pair of police officers showed up and intervened and separated us. Thankfully, the officers let Beverly and I go while they detained Scott for more questioning. Although I suspect that they only did so because I didn't escalate things. After that day, I didn't see Scott again for a long time. Eventually, I went to school for law, and after I graduated, I knew exactly what I wanted to do once I graduated and set my sights on becoming a police officer. I had been bullied as a child, and I wanted to do my part to help prevent others from having to experience it. I'm also happy to say that Beverly and I are still together, and are married, and are expecting our first child. Things for me were going very well. Then one day the unexpected happened. My partner and I got a call to report to a domestic abuse call, and as we pulled up to the house, there standing out in front of the house was Scott and his girlfriend. His girlfriend was on the ground in tears, and it was obvious that she had been hit by him more than once. My partner rushed over and drew his nightstick and hit Scott on his back to get him away from his girlfriend. Seeing this, I ran over and pinned Scott down and threw handcuffs on him. I would be lying if I said that I didn't put a bit more weight into where I put my knee on his back, and I have no doubt that he'll have a very large bruise there. After we had thrown Scott into the back of the squad car, We interviewed his girlfriend, who told us that Scott had threatened to kill her, and she wanted to press charges against him, and I couldn't really blame her. The case against him was pretty airtight, and considering how badly she was hurt and what he had said to her, I knew that he was more than likely going to face some serious prison time. It was an amazing feeling arresting my childhood bully, and all the way to the police station I made sure to tell Scott all about how my life had turned out, and how Beverly and I were expecting. It was plainly obvious that with each word he was getting more and more frustrated, but my partner and I just laughed it off. Oh, and my partner is Derek, one of my old teammates, and before I joined the team, he had been a former friend of Scott's, but after I joined the team, he kicked him to the curb. So the whole ride to the police station was a bit of a reunion. On my sister's third-month celebration, my mom announced that she'd be going out into the streets to feed a few beggars. Her fans all contributed some amount of money to her as support. However, rather than feeding real beggars, my mom and her boyfriend hired a few people, had them pretend to be beggars, and position in the places they'd planned to visit. My name is Chris. It's my 15th birthday today, and my adoptive parents are putting things up for my birthday party. It all still feels like a dream because I'd never had a birthday celebration. My real mother never acknowledged it when I was with her. You might be wondering why I'm with adoptive parents. Well, my mother was obsessed with social media and couldn't care less about her children. All she was focused on was her fame and the money it made her. She was ready to do anything to maintain it. At the tender age of 3, I knew what a camera was as my mother was always putting it in my face. She got famous first by using me. To her fans, I was a disabled child. My mother would force bitter tablets in my mouth before turning on the camera. The tablets made me drool uncontrollably, and sometimes made me throw up. I was forced to pretend to not know how to speak whenever she turned the camera on. I was also made to start using a wheelchair from age 6, even though I had no problem walking, because she didn't want anyone knowing about my true state of health. She didn't send me to a regular school. She had her elder sister, who was a teacher, homeschool me. My aunt was bad in her own way. I never understood what she taught, as she was always in a rush. And when I made a small mistake, I got the beating of my life. When I was 9, my mom got pregnant with my younger sister. Every day, she would sit in front of her camera, fake crying and asking her followers to pray for her, as she was stressed enough by me and didn't want another disabled child. One day, before starting her usual live sessions, she asked me to throw up in front of the camera while being fed. I refused. Why should I do that, Mom? I never throw up while eating.
Are you talking back to your mother? You must do as I say if you don't want to experience death. Do you understand?
I was scared because I didn't want to die. Once she started the live session, she began talking about a community of disabled children she recently started taking care of from some of the money she made from her job as a chef. And as always, she talked about how stressful it was, combining all that with me, her disabled son. I couldn't believe how much lies she was making up. Firstly, she hardly ever left the house, so the community of disabled children, which she claimed to be funding, didn't exist. Also, she wasn't a chef. What my mother did was prepare food at home and lie to them that it was for customers. And I wasn't disabled. I could do everything within the capacity of a normal child. While telling all those lies, she kept feeding me pudding, knowing how much I got irritated by even the sight of it. When I couldn't take it anymore, I was forced to throw up. My mother let out a scream, feigning shock. I looked up to her and realized that tears had quickly formed in her eyes.
Why are you doing this to me, Jake?
My mom never called me by my real name in front of her followers. I was known as Jake. She was in tears. I mean, she'd wanted a reaction from me, and that's why she forcefully fed me the pudding. Did she have to cry?
Why are you making me so sad?
I couldn't break out of the character she'd created for me, so all I could do was stare at her while she ranted. She had to finish up the live session earlier than planned. A few months later, my sister was born. Although she was only my half-sister, I loved her. My mom's boyfriend, Brian, who'd been living with us for a year, was the father of my sister. I had no idea who my father was, or if he was still alive somewhere. One night, a few months after my sister was born, I left my room to get water in the kitchen, and overheard my mom and her boyfriend discussing ways they could involve my sister in her deceit. I quickly burst into the kitchen. "I'm not gonna let you do that, Mom," I told her.
You little rat! How much more do I have to warn you to watch your mouth?
"He's not gonna learn with just words. I'll teach him the hard way." That night, I was given the beating of my life. While my mom stood and watched, her boyfriend hit me to the extent that my ankle got broken and a huge lump appeared on my forehead. I crawled back to my room in heavy tears and pain. The next day, when her followers asked what happened to me, she lied that I'd fallen from the staircase while she went away to empty the trash can. After that, she revealed that she had a huge reveal to make. Now, my mom had never shown what my sister looked like to her audience. When she suddenly brought her from her room, I was shocked to see my sister having extremely long hair. The previous night, she still had her short, curly hair. As much as I badly wanted to ask what was going on, I had to save it until the live was over. My mother lied and said that my sister was born with very long hair, which grew extraordinarily fast. She further stressed that she'd cut my sister's hair off twice since birth, but the hair grew so quickly. In reality, when my sister was born, she barely had any hair on her head. But of course, my lying mother always had everything planned out. Her followers immediately took a liking to my sister. That day, my mother made more money than she'd ever gotten. I knew because I overheard her again while she was talking about it with her boyfriend. "She's more profitable than that son of yours. This is why we should sell him off." My jaw dropped in shock. He'd been proposing for my mom to sell me?
Right? We should sell him and tell everyone he got lost. He's beginning to piss me off lately.
I couldn't believe my ears. I ran back to my room without the water I'd gone for. For the next few weeks, my sister appeared more in front of our mom's camera than I did. As much as it made me happy that I was gradually getting freed, I felt bad for my sister, who had to endure wearing that uncomfortable wig every day. On my sister's third-month celebration, my mom announced that she'd be going out into the streets to feed a few beggars. Her fans all contributed some amount of money to her as support. However, rather than feeding real beggars, my mom and her boyfriend hired a few people, had them pretend to be beggars, and position in the places they'd planned to visit. My mother also had us take a tasteless pill that sent us into dreamland a few minutes later, before she and Brian took the cameras and left the house. I woke up hours later to find a sachet of the pills forgotten in my room. I quickly grabbed it and hid it under my bed. The videos of them feeding the beggars went viral in the media, getting her even more fans, and of course, more money. Seeing that more money was brought from the new scheme, my mom decided to add that to using us. On some days, we would appear on her camera. On other days, she'd go out to feed her hired beggars. For a moment, I did think their plan to sell me off was no longer going to happen, until I walked in on them discussing it in the living room. I quickly hid behind the curtain to avoid being seen. Brian had already made the negotiations with the buyers, and they'd be coming during the night of the following day. Sweat gathered in my face as I trembled in fear. I returned to my room and thought deeply about how to prevent it. I needed to protect my sister from being a victim of that in the future. After a long time, I finally figured out what to do. The next day, my mom ordered me to bring Brian and her a glass of water each. That was my chance. I quickly took 2 of the pills and dissolved them in each glass of water before taking it to them. A few minutes later, when I returned to the living room, they were both resting on each other, deeply asleep. I quickly grabbed my mom's phone. I unlocked it, and following how I'd been watching her begin her live session, I started one. Of course, her fans were surprised seeing me alone on their screens. "Hello everyone, I'm Chris, not Jake. Jake doesn't exist, and I'm not disabled. I've never been disabled," I revealed to them. Comments flowed in, all expressing their shock. I told them all about my mother's tricks, and also their plans to sell me off that night and disguise it to look like a robbery. I also revealed how I'd put them to sleep using the same pill she used on my sister and I. Then I called out our home address and begged them to contact the police before the buyers arrived. Luckily, they were quick to respond. I kept the live going, and soon, a police vehicle pulled into the driveway. The cops came in and hid inside and outside the house. Afterward, I turned off the live. The buyers arrived a few minutes later. They barged into the living room and found my mom and Brian asleep. "What's going on?" I was hiding behind the chairs with the cops. Next thing we heard was another voice saying they should leave. We immediately got out of our hiding place. On seeing the cops, the buyers quickly pulled out their guns. "I'll shoot if you come any closer." Hearing their threat, the cop beside me clicked on a device behind him, and in a second, 5 policemen quietly walked in through the open door. Before the buyers could attack, the cops hit them on their heads with their guns and sticks, causing them to collapse to the floor. We were all taken to the station, my mom and Brian still asleep. Once we got to the station, a child care agency was immediately contacted, and we were taken away by them. My mom and Brian woke up hours later and found themselves in a cell with the buyers who regained consciousness before them. From what I heard from some of the child care staff, they also used to be fans of my mom. She'd lost all her followers, and her account had been brought down after a lot of people reported it for fraud. A week later, they were taken to court. My mom, Brian, and the buyers all claimed to be not guilty, but all evidence pointed to the opposite. Throughout the trial, my mom continuously sent piercing glares at me, but I refused to be intimidated, and when it was my turn, I gave my testimony and told the courtroom everything that had actually been happening. My mom was sentenced to 17 years imprisonment for fraud, child abuse, and attempted human trafficking. Brian was giving 15 for child abuse and attempted human trafficking, while each of the buyers got 20 years. Each for human trafficking, as investigation revealed that they'd been doing it for years. Before she was taken away to prison, my mother glared at my sister and I.
I hope you both never receive love from anyone.
It was quite harsh for a mother to say that to her children. The child care agency took good care of us until it was time to take us to an adoption center. We were only there for 2 weeks before our adoptive parents came and adopted both of us. We've been with them for nearly 5 years. I'm in my last year in junior school, and my sister's almost done with her primary education. I haven't seen my mom since that day at the courthouse, and I sincerely wish I never do again. Life is better without her. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
Just then, my mother-in-law came out of the jungle and began laughing at me.
See, now this is what you deserve. You want to act like an animal with my son and go off and get pregnant. Then that's how I'm going to treat you. Now look at you, you're helpless.
You must be completely insane. You're going to regret this. Just then, some officers came out of the jungle with their weapons drawn, and they snuck up behind my mother-in-law. Hey there, my name is Maria, and boy do I have a story to tell. Basically, my story ends with me going to the hospital because of my mother-in-law's insanity. But let me not get too ahead of myself here. Let me start from the very beginning. I was living with my husband Carl, and we had just discovered that I was pregnant. When I initially told Carl about the pregnancy, his reaction was much less enthusiastic than I would have wanted.
You're pregnant? We aren't ready for this. I thought you were on birth control.
I am, but sometimes it doesn't work. Aren't you happy?
No, I'm not happy. I'm disappointed and I feel deceived.
I was horrified that Carl thought that I had purposely gotten pregnant because I was telling the truth. I was on birth control, but even if you take every measure possible to prevent it, sometimes it can still happen. Even though we hadn't been trying to have a baby, I found that I was rather excited about it. I knew that even though my pregnancy was not on purpose, I was still going to love my child no matter what. After a little bit of convincing, Carl eventually came around to the idea of having a child. He promised he would do all he could to support me and our child, but I wasn't so sure. See, Carl has always been pretty lazy, and he doesn't even have a stable career that he can rely on to bring in good money. I knew better than to ever bring this up to Carl though, because he would lose his temper and start yelling. Ever since we first met, Carl had never treated me the best. Even on our first date, he yelled at me for ordering the most expensive thing on the menu. But I had decided to stay with him because he was my first love and the only boyfriend I ever had. Anyways, once Carl had come around to the idea of our child, he decided it was time to tell his mother about it. Me and his mother had never got along, and I still remember the first time I met her. Me and Carl had been dating for some time, and she invited me over to her house. But when she saw me through the peephole, she called Carl's cell phone and told us both to leave. She claimed she took one good look at me and could tell what kind of girl I was. Anyways, Carl insisted that I go over to her place and tell her about the pregnancy. He said he would not be able to make it because he would be out looking for a better paying job. I reluctantly agreed and packed my bags for a weekend with my mother-in-law. You see, his mother lives on the other side of the country, so I would have to take a plane to go see her. I didn't like that my husband would not accompany me on this trip, but I accepted it because looking for a better paying job was very important, especially with the baby on the way. The flight to my mother-in-law's house was very long, and I felt so cramped and uncomfortable since most planes have almost no room to stretch out. Coupled with being uncomfortable from my pregnancy, it was the perfect recipe for being sore. Finally, when I landed, I called a taxi and directed them to drop me off at my mother-in-law's house. My mother-in-law has always been a strange person, so I should mention that her house is not your average house. It is in the middle of the jungle, and it is pretty far from the closest village. She moved there a couple years after Carl's dad had died because she couldn't deal with being near all of his old stuff. When I got to her house, I nervously knocked on the door. To my surprise, she opened it immediately and was genuinely surprised to see me. After the shock of seeing me at her door, she invited me inside and actually apologized for her behavior when I'd come to meet her before. I was shocked that she was being so nice and accepted her apology. But her true colors would once again show when it was time to tell her the big news. Well, there is a reason I've come today, actually.
Oh, really? What is that?
I'm pregnant.
You're what? That's disgusting. You should not have been doing that with my son.
What do you mean?
I knew you were a dirty girl. My son does not have the means to be a father right now.
Are you serious? Are you really not excited that you are going to be a grandmother?
Not to your evil baby. I want you out of here immediately. Book the next flight you can get and get out of my house.
I was horrified to hear that my mother-in-law did not approve of our child. I had no idea why she would think that something like this was not possible. After all, I was married to her son. I guess the only explanation is that she had gone somewhat crazy from living out there all by herself for so long. Either way, I began crying and tried to book the earliest flight back home. My anxiety only grew when I saw that the earliest flight didn't leave until the next evening, meaning that I would have to spend the night with my mother-in-law. Upset and crying, I called Carl and told him what had happened. It was horrible. I just wish I was home with you right now.
Well, to be honest, she does have a point.
What do you mean?
It's true that you shouldn't have gotten pregnant. Now be nice to my mother and take care of her. She is the most important woman in the world to me.
I couldn't believe my ears. My own husband was siding with my demented mother-in-law. Just then, I heard that awful woman demanding to come help her. I found her in the kitchen and she said she overheard that I would have to stay the night. She said that was fine, but that I was going to need to help her with some yard work. I hated yard work, but I guess I didn't really have a choice, so I agreed. She told me that while she was raking, I would have to travel into the woods to gather firewood. I shrugged it off and said fine. The weird thing was that she insisted that I go down this very specific trail in the woods, and she even pointed and directed me right down it. While I was walking down the trail, I started to get a very bad feeling. Then, all of a sudden, my feet got caught up in something, and I was sucked into the air. I had been caught in a trap. My feet were tied together, and I was hanging upside down. I began screaming maniacally for help, but I knew nobody could hear me. I knew what must have happened. It was my insane mother-in-law. She must have set this trap while I was on the phone, and then set me up to be caught in it. I knew I had to act fast, so I pulled out my phone and dialed for emergency services. I told them the address of my mother-in-law, and they told me they would come as fast as possible. Just then, my mother-in-law came out of the jungle and began laughing at me.
See, now this is what you deserve. You want to act like an animal with my son and go off and get pregnant, then that's how I'm going to treat you. Now look at you, you're helpless.
You must be completely insane. You're going to regret this. Just then, some officers came out of the jungle with their weapons drawn, and they snuck up behind my mother-in-law. They tackled her to the ground and immediately put cuffs on her. It turns out that they had heard her telling me it's what I deserved, and said that it counted as a confession. They cut me down from my booby trap and helped me up. I explained the whole situation, and they asked me if I wanted to press charges even though she was family. I told them that I would absolutely be pressing charges to the highest extent, and they told me I was making the right decision. The next couple of months were a complete blur. I flew home and was interviewed by many media outlets on my harrowing tale. There were even people that encouraged me to write a book about my experience, and I did, and it actually turned out to be a huge hit. It was around this time that I came to the realization that my husband was a scumbag, and although it was scary to leave him, that I would be far better off without him. I decided that I wanted to divorce him, and that I didn't want anything to do with him. After all, he was abusive to me and didn't want anything to do with our child, and would be a terrible parent anyways. Of course, it didn't hurt that I was making very good money off of my book sales. He begged me to stay with him and told me he would be better. But I didn't believe a word he was saying. I kicked him out of our house and got a restraining order after I told the police how he was verbally abusive towards me and he was forced to live on the streets. As for my mother-in-law, I watched on the news as she was sentenced to 15 years in a maximum security prison for attempting to harm an individual. When I had gone on that trip to her house that day, I had no idea my life would be completely flipped upside down, but everything happens for a reason. Now, my son is going to be born in a couple of months, and I couldn't be more excited. My wealth continues to grow from all of my book sales, and I even recently got an offer to have my book be turned into a major motion picture. Some people say the way I acted towards my husband and his mother was much too harsh, but I disagree. What do you think? Hi, I'm Beatrice, and yeah, the title is as dramatic as it sounds. I'll be going through how my mom killed my dad and how I found out. It was one of the most shocking things I'd discovered in my life, and I still can't believe that my own mother would do something like this. My mom's name is Lydia, and she had gotten married to my dad, Felipe, when they were in their mid-20s. I remember that dad owned a pretty successful company, and that mom was a stay-at-home parent, so I didn't get to see my dad too often. Dad's company made him a lot of money, and so both my younger brother Reed and I got a lot of gifts during our birthdays and the holidays. I thought our family was so happy, and we were. Or at least Reed and I were, but since we were pretty young and didn't understand adults, I guess Lydia and Felipe had issues of their own. When I was in high school, Mom and Dad divorced, and my mom somehow managed to get full custody of my brother and I, while Dad was forced to pay a lot of child support. I was quite saddened, since now that meant that I would see my dad less. And what's worse, Lydia moved us to a tiny apartment, and we stopped getting the expensive gifts that we were used to. As I got older, I found it very interesting that my dad would text me every Christmas, asking me if I'd received a gift in the mail yet. I told him I hadn't, which I always found very suspicious. Felipe began to suspect that my mom was taking our gifts from the mailbox and probably selling them for money. This made sense, since every time I was missing a gift, Lydia would come back with one for herself. Dad even admitted that they had divorced over my dad putting a budget on my mom due to her spending addictions.
Lydia, what's this? Why did you spend $4,000 last week?
What's the problem? I know damn well that you can afford everything I buy. Don't be so harsh and such a cheapskate.
Then something terrible happened. My father had a stroke and was in rough shape. At the time, I was very worried about him when a miraculous thing happened. Mom remarried Dad out of the blue. The situation demanded a caretaker, and surprisingly, Lydia stepped up. Despite their past separation, everyone who knew Lydia considered her a hero for returning and willingly taking on the responsibility of caring for Dad in his time of need. But again, not every tale ends happily. Dad must have been in worse shape than we had previously thought, and he passed away unexpectedly mere weeks after his remarriage to Mom. The tragedy deeply affected Mom, leading her to isolate herself for weeks, unwilling to even talk to or look at us. Reed and I were also filled with sorrow. The memory of Dad's absence haunted us each week. The reality of him being gone weighed heavily on our hearts, a constant reminder that not everything ends as you want it. Our aunt was actually the one who prepared the funeral, since my family was too upset to do anything about it. Right after the funeral happened, Lydia came home with a bag full of money. I immediately asked her where she'd gotten it, and she explained that Dad passed the company on to her. I was really suspicious and didn't believe it, but I knew that I had to find the truth on my own.
Honey, do you want to see your father's will? It doesn't give much to you and your brother. He left you $50, but I'm sure Philippe had his reasons.
Sure, Mom. What? How come I only get $50?
Like I said, Dad probably had his reasons. He still loves you.
So, it's been a few weeks, and I'm beginning to wonder if the will that our mother showed us was genuine or not. It was, of course, possible that our father thought that we wouldn't need anything, as my brother and I are fairly self-sufficient, but it just feels odd that he would only leave us with so little. Considering my dad's intelligence, I knew that there was no way that he would just throw all of his money to Mom after he passed. If she was shamelessly spending money while he was still alive, who knows what she's doing now that Dad's gone. Then, one day, I was just chilling on the couch when I caught the unmistakable sound of my mom digging into her closet. Curiosity hit me, and I snuck into her room the second she had left the house. I began snooping around in her suitcases and drawers. Crazily enough, I stumbled upon a handbag loaded with stacks of cash. This had to be at least $600,000. I couldn't believe that she would just leave that much cash lying around. My heart began to sink and my nerves became rattled when I uncovered a sealed folder with some paperwork inside. I was unsure if I should open it or not. If I decided to open the envelope because I was curious, I might actually get into some serious trouble with Lydia. Holding in a breath, I tore open the file. It was mostly empty, but a few papers fell out. I grabbed a wrinkled-looking paper and began to read. As my eyes scanned along the text and went from row to row, they watered up more and more. This was Dad's real will. In it, he stated that he was very clearly going to pass his company on to Reed, my brother. He also said that I would be getting partial ownership of the company as well, although the main thing I was getting from him was the house. The real will gave my mom only most of Dad's expensive furniture and about $5,000. It was a lot less than an entire company and a house, but I could now see why Lydia wanted to hide this and act as if it didn't exist. I quickly snapped a few photos of the original will, just in case anything happened to it. I then grabbed the other paper and looked at it. It was the will that Lydia had shown me. Yup, it stated that she'd get everything that Felipe owned and only give Reed and me very little cash.
What are you doing?
I was startled by my brother coming in. Apparently, I had begun to sob and I didn't even notice. I showed Reed the will, and as he read on, his hands balled into fists. The idea that Lydia had swindled my brother and I out of our true inheritance was enraging. Reed quickly grabbed the whole file and brought it to his room. I followed him. What should we do?
I don't know. We could confront her, but Mom has a lot of power. She could claim that we're lying about all of this.
Yeah.
But this is way too much of a coincidence. Mom comes back to Dad and he dies only 3 weeks later? It's too close for this to seem accidental.
There's no way you're accusing Mom of murder.
Think about it, Beatrice. Dad was in poor health, but his company was at its peak. Imagine all the money that the company is still making. Besides, the doctors said that all Dad needed was caring and he'd recover fully.
You're right. But wouldn't the doctors know how he died? If Mom killed him, surely they would know.
Yeah, unless...
Unless what? I was a little confused about my brother. Clearly, Reed had watched a few too many crime shows. But I listened to him, and he began to theorize that maybe Lydia had asked the doctors to hide his real cause of death or something. His theory could completely be valid, so I contacted my aunt and asked her to come over with her copy of Dad's will. When I opened it, I immediately noticed that it was the one that Dad actually wrote. Reed got mad and started to accuse our aunt of also hiding the secret, but she claimed that she never opened it since she read the one that Mom had. I mentally face-palmed. You're telling me that all of this could have been fixed in the first place if my aunt had just decided to read her own paper? Anyway, my aunt realized that Lydia had lied about everything to get the money. We then went to visit the lawyer that had written our father's will. From here on, my aunt kinda took over. She asked the lawyer what could be done about how things had gone down, and the lawyer started the proceedings that would set things right. My aunt made sure to get everything straight and got the company back from under my mom's name. Reed and I went to the hospital where Dad was pronounced dead, and we pretended to bribe the doctors to ask them for how Felipe actually died. After a few minutes, they cracked.
It was an overdose. Lydia said he'd killed himself. Dad would never do that. And the files say he died from a heart attack. Why would you lie if he had actually committed suicide? Lydia admitted that she accidentally gave him too much medication, and that he began to You know,
Don't lie now. If you tell us the truth, we have 80,000 that we're sure you'd like to have.
I don't know. She said that she would give me any amount of money I wanted if I just lie for her. She said she could only come up with the money if I lied.
This was pissing me off. I grabbed Reed and we quickly left, ignoring the doctor when he demanded that we give him the money. We had actually recorded the conversation in secret, so there was no need to actually give him what we promised. The two of us went to the police station right after. I wasn't sure what to do, though. We had to tell the officers our suspicions of Mom killing Dad, and it wasn't like we could get a clear confession from her. However, we had them open an investigation into our father's death. Reed and I then decided to just confront Lydia and show her all of the evidence we had. I was honestly nervous, but if our theories were right, then we might just get her to confess. An hour later, the police took my mom into the station, and we were given an opportunity to speak with her along with them. My brows furrowed, seeing her wearing a luxurious fur coat. That was Dad's money. The officers looked over the evidence and questioned my mom. They also took the doctors in to prod them about their role in covering up our father's true cause of death. It's not clear to me, but the chief of police escorted my brother and me to the observation room, where Lydia was in tears. She was admitting fully to handing Dad too many pills. She also cried as she explained that she had actually forced him to write and sign the fake will. The officer put her into cuffs and hauled her to one of the jail cells. I was disappointed, my face burning up in both sadness and anger. I couldn't believe that she'd do something like this, but at least we'd caught her. As Reed and I passed her cell, Reed gave her the finger and I barely even looked at her. Lydia didn't deserve any attention. She was a monster in my eyes now. So in court, my mom was sentenced to 15 years in jail. It's not enough, and of course, this sparked an outrage in our community since everyone found out the truth. I was upset about the short amount of prison time. But that's a good amount of time for Reed and I to fix the company back up and actually use the money for good. Unlike Lydia, who only used the money to feed her spending habits. I think I only visited Mom once so far during her prison sentence. It was to deliver a small cake for her 50th birthday. It wasn't since I was feeling nice, but I wanted to send another message. The cake had a middle finger right in the center with a note saying that she shouldn't have been greedy. I also wrote that she was cut off from the family and that nobody was to be helping her when she got out of prison. I later got a phone call from her with some mean words, but I'm still not satisfied. I still have a few more ideas of what to bring her, and I'm sure it will make her feel upset and hopefully regret ruining everyone's life. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.